Okay. So we are going to see a basic Angular project setup. Like when we set up any Angular project, and this is considering if you are a fresher. So we are not going into deep, like how do we set up the project architecture very in a deep manner. But the basic thing, whatever, whenever you are creating a project, what are the basic things you should create? Just like the folder structure, reusable components, pipes, directives, services, how you should create the services. That thing we are going to discuss. Uh, and the project idea, like we need a scenario. Whenever we are creating a project, there is something project which we work, right? So I'm considering employee ERP app. Inside that, I'm going to have employee page, then attendance page, advance page, leaves page, and the salary page. These are the various pages I'm going to have. Okay. And this application is going to be created for any, let's say, particular office. So obviously, login page will be there because we cannot put our application without any login. For it's not a website. So for website, we normally don't have the login page. But if it is an admin application, obviously there will be a login page. Correct? So this will be an external page, additional one page we will have now. So when we talk about project setup, basically it's just creating the folder structure first. It's not like you are in .NET or Java. There are some ways by which we create library project, and so many things are there. But in Angular, when we talk about project setup, it's just creating the proper folder structure so that we can divide our application code properly. Okay. Now, so in app folder, our whole application is there. So I have created the Angular 17 project with standalone false. So if you see the package.json, here you can see 17.1 version is there. But in app folder, you are going to get the C app module also. Because once when I created the project, I have created the project with ng new project name with standalone false. So this command will create a project, but with the older structure, not with the newer structure. In actual 17 version, if we don't provide the standalone false, we won't get app module. We will get app config. The new, all the component will be by default standalone, right? So I wanted this with previous version. Okay. Now, so by default, app component is our parent component, right? We get app routing module.ts. App module is there where we register everything. Now, inside app folder, we are going to create the basic folders. Now, first folder I will create is to store the pages. Like pages is going to be a folder where you will create all the components which are going to be connected with the routes. Means components of which you are going to create the routes, right? Let's say whatever we discuss here. So these are nothing but the components which we will create the route. User is going to access this component by using the route. So all these components we will create in the pages. After that, in app folder, next folder I will create is the shared one. Okay. Now shared. So in shared folder, we normally keep why word shared? Like in all the industry level project, we use this common term. Means we keep let's say it is a directive, custom pipe or custom directives. Like we keep the things which are going to be shared across all the applications. These are nothing but shared items. Okay. Now in shared item, again, I will be create what we can create in shared folder. So pipes, custom pipes. We have default pipes also, right? But if we need, we can create our custom pipes also. Then we can create custom directives. So directives. Then we can create reusable components also, right? In our application, let's say some part of UI is there, which you are using in all the components. So rather than creating that UI in all the component, we will put that UI into reusable component, and wherever we need that part of UI, we will use our reusable component so that your code is in a single place, right? So you are not repeating your code. So for that, we create one more folder that we will call it as a reusable component. Or someone will call it as a widgets also, or someone will only say it as a components also. But just to understand properly, we are creating a folder name with reusable component. So in shared, these are the things we are going to have: custom directives, custom pipe, and our own reusable component. Okay. Now we won't be creating the route of reusable component. Correct? Now, then in app folder, again, one more folder I'm going to create that will be core. Right? Again, why core? So in all the industry level applications, whenever anyone is setting up the project, they will create this kind of folders, core, shared. So that's why naming convention should be same. It's not mandatory that we should use the core folder only, but in all the industry level application, you are going to find core folder, shared folder. That's why I'm also giving the same name. So you should be familiar. Now in core folder, what we do? So core folder will, it won't contain any template kind of thing. It is not concerned with the UI. It is more concerned with the coding, means services, model, correct? Utility functions, whatnot. Okay. Because in shared folder, this is kind of a thing which you are going to mainly deal with the template. But here, actual coding kind of classes we are going to create. So inside in core folder, first folder we will create is service. Okay. So after service folder, I will create one more folder that will be models. So now what is model? So those who are from .NET or Java background, they might know what is model. Models are nothing but the classes, right? But in Angular case, models, in Angular, let's say we work on the TypeScript. So in TypeScript, there are two ways. Either you can create class or you can create a interface. There are two ways to create those, right? So inside model folder, again, I will create two folders. So interface. By now you might have got like it's just a folder creation, separating our files. That is nothing but the project setup and class. Okay. So in model folder, we have created class and the interface. Now in service folder, let's come back to our pages. So if we see, we have an employee component, attendance component, advance component, leaves component, salary component. Now, how many service you are going to need? Again, login component is also there. So how many service you need? It based upon your project. Let's say if we see around, let's say 5 to 7 components are there, right? And let's say CRUD operation. So 5 to 7 into 4, correct? So we are not going to have so many API calls. So either you can go with one service only. Let's call it as an employee service. And all the API call function you can create in the employee service only. That is also fine. But if you are actually preparing for the interview, you are in the learning phase. So rather than creating only one service, you can create service for all the modules like employee module, attendance module, advanced module. You will create multiple services. Got it? So in a service folder, you will create all the services, whatever the components you are going to create. For each component, you will create the services respective. So let's say over here, again, just to again separate it out, we can create employee folder over here. And in employee folder, let me create one more. Attendance. Now in attendance folder, I will create attendance service. So how do we create the services? ng generate service attendance. So this will create two files. One is for testing and one is the actual service file which we use. Correct? So in attendance service, you can see two files are there. Just like in employee also, we will create, right click on that, open in terminal, ng generate service and employee. So we have created two service, employee and the service. Okay. Now in this service, either you normally in service, whenever we get asked the question like, why do you create the service? So we immediately say like to store the API call, but no, service is a file where normally we store the API call functions, but service is just a file which we use to store reusable codes, right? So some code is there which you are going to use in all the component. Rather than writing that code in all the component, we keep that reusable code into service in a function, and that we use that function in all the component. That is the use of service. Service is just another class. It's a simple TypeScript class. If you see, this is nothing but a proper class. We get the injectable decorator because it's a service. So it's a normally class, right? So we can create normal function also. We can create API call function also. Even though if we have to store some data and that data you need to access it all the application, you can create a normal variable also and that you can access in all the component. That is also a benefit of service. Again, into some advanced level, we create subject behavior. Okay, but on a fresher level, it is not expected that you should fully understand subject and subject behavior. Okay, so that's why I'm not going into deep on that. Let's close it. So service folder, inside service folder, you will create multiple folders according to your module and you will be creating the services. Now in services, you will put your normal API call function or whatever functions you need. So inside core, we have got model services. Then we talked about login. So when we create the login page and when user logged in, okay, there will be certain pages which will be accessible once user is logged in. So if user is not logged in and if he knows the route, if user is not logged in and if he knows the route and if he try to enter that in the URL, still he will be accessible. Still he can access to that. So to restrict that, we need to implement guard. Okay. So guard is like the basic implement in English term. What we know of guard is to protect something. So we need to protect our routes, right? So logic will be like if user is authenticated, then only we will allow user to access that page. Means route. So we create guards. So one more folder I will create to store our guards. So guard, again, there are multiple types of guard. Can activate guard is there, which we normally use in login. Can deactivate guard is also there. Okay. So where do we use can activate, can deactivate guard? Let's say, let's try with user registration page. I'm just explaining you where can deactivate is going to be needed. Okay, so let's say you are on the you are using an application and you are filling some form. Okay, you started it and then you trying to close it, but you want to show an alert to the user that there is some unsaved data because user started typing and he might accidentally click on the close icon, right? So you want to just alert user like you have started filling something and you are trying to navigate away. You have some unsaved changes. You might have seen this pop up if you are using any application like that. So that kind of thing we can do in the can deactivate. So in can deactivate, we check like if this form is dirty or not. If user has started the filling the form, then you can do that kind of coding in can deactivate guard. Can activate guard is before loading the route, we write the code, right? So in guard, you will create can activate and can deactivate. And again, resolve is also there. Can activate child, 5 to 6 guards are there. You will implement whatever you need. Correct. Now in Angular 17, before Angular 17, sorry, before Angular 16, if you create the guard, it was a service. But now when you create the guard, it's a arrow function. So let me just create a sample one. We will create can activate guard. So ng generate guard and guard name I'm giving as auth. Let's enter. ng generate guard and the guard name I'm giving as a auth guard. So now it is asking us like which type of guard you need. So basically 4 types are there. One more resolve is there, but resolve we create something else. So let's say I need the can activate guard. So you need to press enter. By a arrow key you can select, but currently I'm creating can activate guard. Enter. So now if you see the can activate guard, see it's a function. So before Angular 16, you used to get the service, but now it's a function. So whatever the logic, let's say you logged in, when you logged in, you are storing some data into local storage. And here you will read that local storage data and by that you will return false and true. And if local storage data is not there, you will return it to login page. So all those things you will write in the arrow function now. So whenever someone asks you like, what are the new things we have got in Angular 17? So you can add one point to this. In Angular 17, it's just not in Angular 17, from 16 it is there. So we have got arrow function in case of guard. Previously it was service. Okay, but now it is an arrow function. Now, whatever the code you might know over there, same way you have to write it over. There is nothing wrong in that. Same code you will write it on. Just the structure, previously it was class, now it is an arrow function. Let's close it. So in guard, you will store all your guards, like whatever guard you are going to create. Service, whatever the service. Model, let's say class. Let's create a class for it. Let's say employee dot ts. So it's a normal ts file. Inside that, we are going to create a class. So export class keyword we have to use, and then employee. What are the properties you know? So let's say name, data type string, let's say emp id, data type. Normally id will have number. Then city, just I'm giving 3 properties. In actual application, there will be multi. So now you can see all the properties are giving error, like all the properties doesn't have initialization. So it's a class. So class will have a constructor. So it is asking us to initialize all those fields. So in constructor, we can access this like empty. This is like initializing default values like this. But let's say name you don't want to initialize and you want to make it optional. So you can add a question mark over here. So now you can see it is not throwing the error for this. So you can create an optional property like this. Got it? Now we have created one class over here. So you might get the question like, can we create only one class in this particular file? No, you can create as many as files. Okay. Export class, let's say attendance. Naming convention, just when you are creating a class name, now try to start the class name with capital. Okay. Whenever we create the variable, we start it with small, right? Like just like over here, second letter capital, right? But when it is a class, try to start it with the capital. So in a single file also, you can create all the classes, whatever you need. But if that number of classes are going to increase, create a separate TS file and just to categorize again, right? Now coming back to interface. So let's create I employee. So I have just added I over there because it's a TS. Again, it is going to be a simple TS file only. Now export. Instead of class, we have to write interface. Let's say employee list. Again, same thing. Let's say empid colon number, name, data type will be string, and city. So, okay. So this is how we create the interface instead of class. Now class has the constructor, right? Interface doesn't have it. So you just have to initialize the property. Let's say what any property you need to make it optional. Again, question mark, you can add it over here also. That's how you create class and interface. Now there might be a question like when to use class and when to use the interface. When you are creating a variable to store some object, and that variable you are going to bind with the form with ng model. So you should go for the class. But if you are creating a variable and in that variable you are just going to store the data, you are not going to bind that variable to any form. So in that case, you can go for the interface. Because when you bind the variable to any form, you need to initialize the values. So in that case, constructor, this class will be more helpful because you in constructor, you have initialized all the properties. Okay. So this is kind of an interview question. As a fresher, you won't face this, but if you are an experienced, you will face this. Like some interviewer will ask you, like there are two ways, class and interface. So when to use which? So this is kind of an interview question. Then model folder are there. Now, one more folder I'm going to need, that is constant. Okay. Now, what is the constant folder? So constant folder is like in my application, what things are there which I'm going to use across all the application. Let's say it is a validation message, like this is required, this pattern is required, minimum length is this kind of. or your API call, right? In your application, nothing should be static. It should come from somewhere. So if you have to change, there will be a single file where you will be changing. Reusability again. With the constant file, the only thing what we achieve is the reusability. Let's say validation message is here. For basic validation required thing, you are writing this is required below the text box. Okay. And that validation message you are using across all the pages. But let's say after certain amount of time, let's say 1 or 2 sprint or some modules have been developed, and then client decided that I need to change that message. Instead of this is required, I need to make it this is mandatory. So if you have hard coded those value into your template, component template, so all the pages wherever you have done that, you need to replace that. But if that this is required message is coming from constant, so you just have to do that in a single class. Correct? So that is the reusability. So in constant folder, we will create our constant file. So let's say now in constant file again, how many constant you can create as per your need. If you know like there are at least going to be 50 or 60 constants, so you can store all those constant in a one file. But if your constant are going to increase, so you can create another file. Let's say just an example I'm taking. Let's say API constant I'm creating. Again, it's a TS file only. Okay. We are working in the TypeScript, so everything will have a TS file. Let's say API constant. Let's say I need to create another file. So validation constant dot ts. Okay. Now, how do we create a constant file? So export const. The name is API constant. Okay. Now this is object. So now in that object, you can create, what do we say? Again, hierarchy you can create. Let's say employee. Now, whenever you are creating key, fill or constant name in your constant file, make sure it is in capital. Because in all the industry level application, whenever we create the constant, we make it capital. It's not mandatory, but it is recommended. Because once you join any company, you are going to see constant file name, constant file key names, constant file keys with capital. So let's say employee. Again, here I'm storing the correct. So let's say we have one more API call, get all employee. Here I will store my actual method name, get employees. So this might be my API name, which is I'm storing over here. Just like that, create employee. Let's say my API method name is add employee. Like that. This is for employee. Then again, we can create attendance. And here you will store all the API call method of attendance, right? Again, this is just we are categorizing. But if you don't want to do it, you can put it at the global level also like that. This is also fine. But if you just want to separate it out, you can separate it out like this also. This will be your constant file. Okay. Next. Now, one more thing is there, that is enum. Again, enum is like something, if you are experienced only, then only enum should be aware. But up to 0 to 2 years, there is no necessary thing that you should be aware about the enums. So enums, just a folder I'm creating. I'm not going to do deep into enum. But so if you join anywhere and if you see the enum, so enum is like with number we store somewhere, and with that we write the code. Okay, once we see the advanced version of this video, we will discuss enum over there. But in this video, we are just going to create the folder structure. So in core folder, you will have constant, enum, guards, model. Inside model, again, we will have class, interface, service, and respective services. In shared, we will have directives, pipes, reusable component. And in pages, you will be creating all the component like this. So this should be your basic folder structure whenever you are creating a project. If you are preparing for the interview, you need to have some repository on the GitHub, right? You need to showcase your work. So whenever you are creating any project that you are going to showcase in the interview, Always make sure these are the minimum folder you should have. Enum you can ignore, but remaining you should have. Okay. One extra thing. So before Angular 15, now we used to get the environment folder, but now after Angular 15, they have removed that. So if you need the environment folder, environment specific thing. So see, this constant is, these constant files are you are going to use in your application. But when we deploy the application, there are multiple environments. Let's say dev environment, QA environment, testing environment, means UAT environment, and the production. So according to the various environment, there are some different, what do we say, constant. Let's say API name is there. According to the different environment, API will be different. Let's say Bitbucket, S3 bucket or blog URL for file server. Again, for mailing, you have something else. According to the API, according to the environment, you have some different constant. So that we normally store into the environment folder. So we can create environment. So let me just open a new terminal. So before Angular 15, now we used to get the environment folder, but now we have to create it explicitly. So ng generate environments. Let's make it in a small ng generate environments. Okay. Once we click on enter, it will create two files and it will update one file. So let's see. So see, it has created environment.ts and environment.development.ts, and it has updated angular.json. Okay, it's not Angular module. So it's angular.json. So here you can see in src folder, it has created two files. See, this is nothing but a constant, same like which we have created. So this is also constant, but it is environment specific. Okay, let's say when you are developing locally, you have dev URL. So let's say API underscore URL. I will put it over here. Let's say www dot or let's dev.api.com. This is API for dev environment and the production. Okay. Now same property, the same property you have to add it over here. And here let's say prod.api.com. So when you publish the build, when you are publishing the build for production, this file will be activated. Sorry, this point here we should have added that prod. And this is development mails for us. So here dev. So when you are working locally, this environment file will be activated. And when you are deploying the application, this will be added. So for production, prod.api URL will be there. Just like that, you will add environment specific. Just naming, this name will be same in all the files. Got it? So it has created two files and it has updated the angular.json. So in angular.json, you will have it where it is replaced. So see, here it has added that. Okay. So this is the extra thing which you have to do when we create the Angular project. So before Angular 15, we used to get the environment folder, but now they have removed it. With each newer version, they are just getting rid of the, what do I say, unnecessary things. If you need it, you install it, right? So previously what was happening, if even though you are not using the environment file, still it was there, right? So that's why they are removing unnecessary thing. If you, they are just not providing it by in a by default project. If you need it, you can install it. But previously it was there by default. Okay. So I will push this repository in void Chetan. This is the project name and this is only the repository name. You will find it. You can just clone it and see the basic folder structure. I will create one more video where we will be actually creating services, files, and the component. But in this video, we have just seen like what folder structure and what we can create in each folders.